the last decade, indie games have gone from an outsider hobby for people with old video cards to a major enterprise. Up to a quarter of Steam's revenue comes from indies, which make up 99% of games released across all platforms. For someone who had dial-up as a kid, this is mind-boggling. Once upon a time, if you tried to put a price tag on something you made in RPG Maker, you'd be told to have your head examined. Yume Nikki and Cave Story, practically household names today, were back in those days not even Googleable. You'd just follow a thread on a forum with less than 100 users and download some sketchy zip off a website that still used frames. Remember frames? Oh, probably not. The modern indie ecosystem makes it much more likely that a developer will be able to get a game to somebody who will enjoy it, but the signal-to-noise ratio has dramatically shifted. They have access to players, sure, but developers now have to fight harder than ever for their attention in a sea of, well, you've seen what Steam looks like these days. Flashback to 14 years ago. One aspiring writer going by the name of Saint Bomber opened a copy of RPG Maker 2003 and got to work, almost certainly without any expectation of the kind of money and acclaim you can score these days. To use some overly broad genre terms, Embric of Wulfhammer's Castle is a light-hearted romantic comedy adventure game. The player inhabits the role of the Duchess of Elsewhere, a noblewoman in her 20s who's being sent to Castle Wulfhammer for an arranged marriage to the eponymous Lord Embric. There's just one problem. The man of the house is nowhere to be found, and in his absence, his subjects have gotten into all kinds of trouble. This may be a familiar setup for fans of visual novels or the romance genre in general, but from that jumping-off point, Embric of Wulfhammer's Castle goes in a direction all its own. Rather than the typical visual novel static portraits over static backgrounds, we're given full control of our character in an open and interactive world. This would be nothing special in an RPG. This is the default RPG Maker format after all, and the world is even largely constructed of stock assets. But that level of interactivity grants us a freedom to get immersed in a way that visual novels rarely do. We're not confined to clicking through menus or mashing Z to get through exposition, nor are we stuck progressing through story routes on rails. Wandering around, poking through boxes of swords, or checking out ancient ruins at our leisure, lends Wulfhammer's lands a sense of place that it uses to great effect, and seeing sprites, even simple ones, actually perform their actions rather than having them described through narration goes a long way toward keeping the player engaged. It also means that the text that we do get isn't wasted on exposition, and herein lies Embric's biggest strength. The dialogue is incredibly well written, and by turns moving and hilarious. Our heroine, the Duchess of Elsewhere, first comes off as a very frivolous person. She's got a big poofy pink dress, speaks in an aristocratic dialect, and frequently loses her clothes in a series of increasingly unlikely mishaps. Many of the castle's inhabitants immediately write her off as a useless bimbo who's only going to get in everybody's way. We learn in time that the Duchess is more than a female-shaped quest reward for a man who is very good at swords. She is charismatic, politically savvy, and skilled at the sort of day-to-day administrative tasks that an adventuring party just isn't suited to. This is the story of an ordinary person trying to deal with the vicissitudes of life in a fantasy RPG. Our missing fiancé is a celebrated hero, the fighter in a high-level Dungeons & Dragons party who, having saved the kingdom from an evil usurper and myriad magical threats, has been granted a slice of it to settle down and govern. Unfortunately, he either has no interest in doing this, or something terrible has happened to him. The man is nowhere to be found, leaving his party members worried for his absence and resentful toward the Duchess, who exists as an embodiment of the new lifestyle they're all reluctantly getting used to, and in at least one case, unwelcome competition for Embric's heart. With the lord of the castle out of the picture and the wedding indefinitely postponed, the Duchess sets about making friends, meeting enemies, and even looking for love. Or at least a bit of entertainment. And on that note, yes, this game is not for kids. It comes with a disclaimer and an option to disable the spicier bits of artwork. However, I streamed it for my patrons over on Patreon, and for the most part, it was a lot tamer than it might sound, rarely venturing beyond the sort of thing you'd see in an R-rated movie or an HBO series. The game is designed to provide light-hearted entertainment and a few laughs. Not, satisfaction. You'll probably want to look elsewhere for that. In addition to its sprites and portraits, the game often makes use of full-screen illustrations. These, like all the game's art, are presented in an amateurish but highly appealing 90s anime sort of style. The portraits do a great job of conveying characterization, and some of the images I can't show you on YouTube worked as absolutely incredible punchlines, sort of like a playable version of the webcomic Ogloff, but generally a lot more tame and down-to-earth. The RPG Maker RTP assets, and the custom sprites that fit in alongside them, do a lot to ground the world in the popular fantasy of the era, just before Game of Thrones premiered and the genre went truly mainstream. As for the content beyond that, nearly all of the on-screen romance is cutesy WLW fun, and easily half of the game's plot is more concerned with D&D world building or political intrigue. There are occasional scenes of danger or menace, but nothing in the way of graphic on-screen trauma. Themes of abuse are explored as we dive into certain characters' backstories, but this is done with a surprisingly mature and delicate touch, and never for the sake of any titillation. I found this part especially interesting because this project was born on the underbelly of the internet 13 years ago. Structurally, the game presents a series of branching narrative routes which are for the most part not mutually exclusive. Pursuing a storyline usually doesn't lock you out of any others, and even if you get an ending, the Duchess will simply wake up afterwards back in her room, ready for her next adventure, often with a new title or costume to show for it. Because all of these storylines take place in a single open world, it's very fun seeing all the moving parts play out as we open up new areas or gain new context for the people and places around us. Whether it's Alice the Maid's super strength and secret barbarian levels, the tragic backstory of our town's shabby little inn, or the true nature of our mysterious bathtub. A determined player can easily see about 70% of the game without a guide, but if you want to make sure you see absolutely every scene, you can check the video description for a link to a detailed and mostly spoiler-free walkthrough. Personally, I usually find romance to be pretty appealing in games, but stories often fail to deliver. Either it's Mass Effect style, where the characters hardly seem to have any agency of their own, or it's just not engaging to begin with. Embric offers believable, complex, and most importantly, likable characters who aren't just there for shallow wish fulfillment. Not all of the stories turn out like you'd expect. There's drama, disappointment, arguments, all the juicy stuff that tends to get forgotten in pursuit of a happy ending. But life, and fiction, can often be a whole lot more interesting than that. Embric of Wulfhammer's castle is available on itch.io with a pay-what-you-like price tag, even if what you like to pay is nothing. If you're strapped for cash, my advice is to download the game for free, make sure it's up your alley, then throw the developer a couple of bones when you can. And if you can't, maybe share a link around with your friends. Or, if you have it lying around, give the developer $1 million, because we need more games like this. So, if you're a girl who likes girls, or a non-girl who likes girls, or you don't care about which kind of people somebody likes, but you do enjoy obscure jokes about D&D random encounter tables and mechanics that haven't been relevant for 20 years, give it a try. There's something here for, well, not everyone, but a lot of people. Hey y'all, and thanks for checking out the video. I'm currently in the middle of working on a deep dive of Rose Engine's survival horror game Signalis, and it's turned out to be a truly gigantic project. I wanted to have it out in time for the Mid-Autumn Festival, but unfortunately I caught COVID twice, something else once, and my house flooded. It's been a wild ride. So I thought I'd throw a quick review together to prove that I didn't die of my many misfortunes and that things are still chugging along. I want to thank the patrons real quick for keeping the lights on, and I promise the next big video's not far off. I know plenty of people want me to get back to the Cataclysm videos too. I'm currently workshopping a way to keep those coming, so if you're waiting for the next one, just sit tight a bit longer and we may have some news. Thank you, and I'll see you all again soon.